Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 100. 100 daily drops, folks. We have covered so many articles on this podcast. We have been over so much news, and we have consumed so much information about Jeffrey Epstein that it'll make your head spin when you go back and think about it. It's countless hours now we have spent on this podcast beating home the point that there is much more here than they want to let on. We have spent countless hours here together discussing how this is not just a man who had very dark proclivities and a man who needed to satiate his desires. We've talked about how this is a man who was engaged in a very elaborate blackmail scheme. And we've also talked about how Ghislaine Maxwell was the brains behind that whole entire operation, in my opinion, obviously. I have no evidence that directly can back that up, no direct links, but when you look at all of the evidence together, there's no other place to go, because we know that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't savvy enough to pierce these levels of society on his own, or else he would have done it sooner. So it was Ghislaine Maxwell who brought him into these upper crust meetings and these higher level rings of society. So she brought him into that world, and once Jeffrey Epstein was in that world, well, he was in his element, right? He was doing his thing, very charismatic, a good manipulator, a very good liar, an awesome self-promoter, and he was around all of these people of influence and all of these people of power, and there was a lot of red flags. And let's be honest, folks, these people just ignored the red flags. We've read about it in the articles. These people ignored the red flags because Jeffrey Epstein could do stuff for them financially. And at the end of the day, it comes down to Jeffrey Epstein was greasing so many palms, and he had pierced so many highly influential circles that nobody thought that it was possible that this man was, running a blackmail operation on them, right? They thought he was just a friend of Ghislaine Maxwell's. Well, lo and behold, Jeffrey Epstein had other plans. And those other plans, what a spider web he weaved, huh? He caught up some of the most highly influential people in his scam that you could possibly imagine. From business moguls to politicians to famous actors to scientists to you name it. Jeffrey Epstein had one or two friends that were visiting his island that were obviously caught up in his scam. So it has been just a wild ride, folks, and I don't think it's going to get any more calm in the coming days, months, weeks, years, whatever. And I think that we just all have to buckle ourselves up and be prepared for a very bumpy ride, because that's what this is. And it's frustrating at times. As we're covering this case, it's definitely frustrating at times. Like, we have the lawyer who told the Palm Beach district attorney and the people who are investigating what happened in that first case that there's not enough evidence for the grand jury testimony to be released. So that's definitely a setback, and we see a lot of that, right? There's a lot of roadblocks thrown up, and there's a lot of pushback from the establishment on what happened in this story. So all we can do is not get frustrated and keep going full charge. And I'll keep doing what I've been doing. Whatever the outlets are producing and they're writing articles about, we're going to cover that. What the news is talking about in this case. And we're going to just follow these articles like we've been doing. Because what it does is it builds this catalog up, and we can go back and we can, refer to different episodes and say, oh yeah, I remember when this happened in Daily Drop number 83. Oh, I see the connection now. And it helps give us basically a forensic map almost, right? So the daily drops, that's why I brought them about, why I created them, and why I've brought them every single day for 100 days, because I feel it's that important that we stay on top of this case. So tonight we have an article that's from the Daily News, and it's about the MCC where Epstein supposedly killed himself, and some of the changes that are occurring there now with a new boss is headed on over to the facility, and I guess they have new legal counsel headed over there as well. So this Daily News article will tell us a little bit more about that. But first, if you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. All right, let's see what the article has to say. New York Daily News. Headline, Federal Jail, where Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, allegedly, gets new leadership, including lawyer at center of heating crisis in Brooklyn lockup. Boy, that sounds great. What do I always say about retreads, right? It's like the NFL. You have all these coaches that get hired. It's like a merry-go-round. They failed everywhere they've been, but somehow they get a job again. Somehow they're put in charge of an NFL franchise again. And you see the same thing with these federal bureaucracies. It's retreads. Let's just move them around, all right? Let's just move them around and, we'll shake things up so they can go somewhere else and screw the other place up even worse than it already is. Come on. Do better. Is that too much to ask? Do a little bit better, please. The hellish federal jail where Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, allegedly, has top new brass, but the Bureau of Prisons' chronic dysfunction continues to plague the lower Manhattan lockup. Former head of federal prisons in Danbury, Connecticut, M. Lacone Vitale, is the new acting warden of the Metropolitan Correctional Center. She replaced James Petrucci, no relation, by the way, even distant. Nobody, they changed a lot of the vowels in the Italian names when we came over, but I can strongly say that I am not related to Mr. Petrucci, who was appointed acting warden of MCC 3 days after Epstein's shocking suicide. The BOP did not reveal why Lincoln Vitale was chosen to take over the jail where Epstein hanged himself, allegedly, in August. Bureau of Prison staff and all facilities are focused on the mission of maintaining safety, security, and good order in our institutions and preparing inmates for a successful return to the community, was all an agency spokesman said. Hold on. Wait a minute. That is all you had to say? So you did a bang-up job of maintaining safety, security, and good order with Jeffrey Epstein. You didn't even know what tier he was on. You did not even know what tier you were supposed to be recording. Talk about the Keystone Cops, or maybe even Reno 911. What a bunch of utter buffoonery. And then this spokesman comes out with this canned-ass, ridiculous statement. Come on, nobody's believing this. This is a bunch of absolute, utter nonsense. BS. BS. We don't believe it. The jail also has a new lawyer, Nicole McFarland, the same woman who is the face of a heating crisis. Oh, perfect, great. Another woman embroiled in controversy. Face of the heating crisis at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn last year. Again, a retread. She's already embroiled in another controversy, so you're going to bring her over into this 5-alarm fire and have her start working here? Because nobody's going to question that. Nobody's going to have any questions why Mrs. McFarland is now over at the MCC. Why isn't she fired? Why isn't she put somewhere else? Why isn't she demoted if she has all of this baggage and she was already under investigation? Why is she over at the MCC now? Again, do better. McFarland arrived at MCC as supervisor attorney on December 8th with a hefty amount of baggage. She served as a top lawyer at MDC during a disastrous week-long power outage and heating failure at the jail holding 1,700 inmates, leaving many shivering in unlit cells. Oh, that's nice. That's just fantastic, folks. You know what? I understand people are in prison, people are in jail, but people need to be treated with dignity. If they're in the care of the federal government, that's an extension of us and an extension of who we are as a people, right? So we have to do everything to make sure they're living in humane conditions at the very least and that they're being protected. Except for the very worst amongst them, which I really don't care what people do with what you do with them, throw them in the hole or whatever, repeat murderers, rapists, etc., etc. Forget about that. People that are never going to be rehabilitated, forget them, find someplace else to put them. But this kind of stuff here, it's a systemic failure. And it looks bad for the supposed greatest country in the whole world to have this sort of thing going on a regular basis. They have to do better. Okay? We can't have this kind of nonsense. And then to bring this lawyer over who was already embroiled in this nonsense, to bring her over to into the Jeffrey Epstein thing? Who is making these decisions? The same guy that probably decided that it was okay to, go to the cell after Epstein died without any cameras or take any pictures. Probably the same person who was watching the wrong tier. What in the world is going on in this part of the bureaucracy, folks? It sparked protests, emergency court hearings, and outcries from elected officials, as it should have. Nicole McFarland represented that medical care continued without problem. I spoke to clients with open wounds not getting treatment. Lovely. What are we, in Sudan? I spoke to clients who had bloody sheets from colitis and couldn't change their sheets and couldn't get care for the colitis. That's tremendous. What are we, living on the Oregon Trail, folks? Really? I spoke to numerous clients not getting psychiatric medications. Whoa, that's a great idea. A bunch of people they're already in prison. They obviously have some mental problems, and you're not giving them their psychiatric medications. That is a fan-effing-tastic idea. The person who came up with that idea should win an award, because that is an absolutely fantastic idea. And I spoke to some of those clients with Nicole McFarland standing next to me, indifferently. Deirdre Von Dornum, the attorney in charge of federal defenders in Brooklyn, said under oath in February. So she's not just making these statements to the paper, by the way, either. She made these statements under oath. So that carries a lot more weight, right? When you make a statement under oath, you better be telling the truth. Because if you lie, well, you're going to pay a penalty if they can prove you lied. The federal government loves to prosecute people like you and me. Believe it. The BOP spokesman said Dornum's allegation was not to our knowledge and adjudicated finding. It was not to our knowledge and adjudicated finding. Okay, all right. A Department of Justice watchdog report on the MDC crisis criticized McFarland and a colleague, though it did not refer to them by name. BOP counsel did not proactively communicate to federal district court representatives sufficient information about why legal visiting had been canceled and inmate conditions of confinement during the power outage. The DOJ Inspector General wrote, boy, the DOJ Inspector General sure is a busy guy, isn't he? He sure is a busy guy, this Horowitz. He has been all over the place. The Russian case, the Ukrainian case, the Epstein case. Does this guy ever find anything that's actually going wrong with the government? Or is he just one of the, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the investigators are going to investigate the investigators? I think he's one of those folks, because guess what? You're telling me all these investigations into Trump and to everybody else, and you're not finding any malfeasance? You're not finding anything that you can prosecute? Again, we do not believe you. Is that clear enough? Because I can write it in crayon, and maybe you can read it then. Brooklyn federal judge Darcy Hall put it more bluntly. I don't trust the representations coming out of the BOP, the judge said in a hearing cited in the report. MCC faces its own heating problems. The building with 768 inmates had a scheduled steam power outage from 10 p.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Saturday. Con Edison, if you're not familiar with New York, well, you don't know the joys of Con Edison. Con Ed, boy, are they fantastic, said nobody ever. Needed to repair equipment that the jail shares with the neighboring U.S. Attorney's Office, BOP confirmed. Oh, boy. I'm sure the Attorney's Office is living on the high horse, though, still. I'm sure they have backup generators pulled in there. I'm sure that they can't be affected by no power outage. They have to do the people's work. And by the people's work, I mean covering for Jeffrey Epstein. During this period, heat and hot water will be affected. We do not anticipate the heat in the building to go below 60 degrees. All inmates have been notified. Every inmate has a blanket and is receiving an additional second blanket. Also, jackets are on hand if needed, the spokesman said. Well, that's nice. I went to a movie the other day, not to digress too much, but it fits in with what we're talking about here. I went and seen Star Wars the other day, and the heater was broke in the theater, and it was 55 degrees. I was sat there for like 2.5 hours, and I was absolutely freezing. Now, these cells are at 60 degrees. I mean, geez. Like I said, people need to be treated humanely, folks, all right? We're not animals. And even though people who have broken the rules, well, they're in there, they're suffering, they're doing their time, and they're suffering the ramifications of their actions. And unless you're amongst the worst, murderers and rapists and that sort, I have empathy for people who are in prison. I don't want to see them, live in some kind of squalid, crazy, Russian gulag conditions. I don't want to see that kind of stuff. So this is a problem, right? And it's even more of a problem that it's happening. We have a lawyer who's coming from a place that was just going through something very similar, who comes over here, who has the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing going on, and now the facility is an absolute dump on top of that. With all of the scrutiny going on for what happened with Epstein, you have to think that this has got to be one of the most stressful jobs that you could possibly have as an employee of the Bureau of Prisons. And good, it should be, because guess what? Somebody needs to answer questions, and if it's your job to do that, you better get ready. The Bureau of Prisons has faced several catastrophic events in recent years. A former warden for the Bureau of Prisons, Cameron Lindsay, told the Daily News. The heating crisis at MDC, Epstein's suicide, and the murder of notorious gangster Whitey Bulger by other inmates in West Virginia all rock the agency, overseeing a population of 175,000. 175,000 federal inmates. That is a lot of federal inmates, folks. Better pay your taxes. The news previously reported that staff morale plummeted at MCC following charges against 2 correctional officers accused of falsifying records the night of Epstein's death. Yeah, because those were the only people that were, at fault. They were the only people in the wrong that night. None of their bosses should be in trouble. Nah. None of the people that handled the evidence of the videotape Jeffrey Epstein's videos of the cell, those people shouldn't be in trouble. Nah. Just these 2. BOP has not had a permanent director for much of the past 4 years. Well, that's nice. There has been a real lack of leadership at the director position of the Bureau of Prisons, Lindsay said. I can't help but think that affects the whole agency trickling downwards. Yeah, you think? There's nobody up top. How is there nobody in charge of this? How is the Trump administration letting this occur? This is a federal post. They need to hire somebody who's competent ASAP. Is there anybody out there that can do this job? I mean, I'm not talking about somebody that they bring in through nepotism or a retread. There has to be somebody out there that could do that job correctly. I mean, are you guys kidding me right now? There's no director for the position, no director position of the Bureau of Prisons? Ay, folks. Like I said, the more we read, the more we learn, the stranger this whole entire ordeal becomes. It's almost like we're living in the Twilight Zone or a different reality. Like when they turned on the CERN machine, it smashed us into a different reality, and we all have no idea, and we're living in some sort of simulation now. That's how crazy all of this is. You can't even wrap your head around it. Every time you start to come to grips with something new drops, and you're like, what in the hell now? How is this possible? And that is what's going on a daily basis, folks. And I'll tell you what, here we are. Here we are. And I think it's going to get a lot more interesting in the future. I think the 16th, if those records in the Virginia Roberts, Ghislaine Maxwell situation get released for public consumption, I think it's going to be on, folks. I think it's going to set off a firestorm. And if she doesn't release them, well, there has to be another route, maybe appealing to a higher court, something like that. But if she releases these documents, oh boy, it will be an absolute and utter firestorm. All right, everybody, if you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI @protonmail.com. And if you would like to help support the podcast and our many adventures that we have planned coming up to support this case, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link inside of the description box. And to everybody who has donated in the last few days, thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. It's because of you we're able to do this trip to Santa Fe without it costing me an arm and a leg. There's a lot of costs that go into this whole entire ordeal, and it's very appreciated to have a little bit of help from the community and from the listeners, because I'll tell you what, it's a big commitment time-wise on my part, and it's also a big commitment financially. But no matter what, I'm going to be here doing these reports and covering this story. And if it wasn't for your generosity and you supporting this show, then obviously I wouldn't be able to go to places like Santa Fe or fly into New York when we get things cracking back east. But I'd still be reporting on this the same exact way, folks. So thank you so much. Again, I'm humbled by your support and by your generosity. It means a lot to me. So I will be back with another episode in the morning, and we will rock and roll from there, folks. Enjoy your Sunday evening, and I hope you all have a great night.